special called Rules, Confirmations, and Special Elections meeting to talk about committee structure for the council. And you have the proposed committee structure that I put together just as a culmination of lots of different people's opinions. Some are on the committee, some are not on the committee. The clerk, former director John Cooper weighed in. And so I sort of took everything from everybody. There's a million ways to do it. We just have to figure out what's going to work best for us, that maybe not all of us, but the majority of us will think will work better. Just as a side note, this is the assignment that we have for all of the legislation that we're going to hear on Tuesday. So the different committees that will meet and what they are going to be hearing are taking up. And as it stands, there's 11 committee meetings. If we went with this, it would go down to 6 committee meetings, and there were several duplications that would obviously not happen anymore. So it is a little bit more efficient so that you don't have a meeting to hear one piece of legislation. And then we've got quorum issues and everybody's all over the place. So that was interesting to me, just to sort of see in real time what this would do, and I'm happy to share it with whoever wants to look at it. So I'm just going to open it up to the floor to you guys on what your thoughts are. Councilman Bradford sent, this is what you have, the highlighted stuff. He ended up not being able to come, and so this was his feedback and his suggestions, so y'all can weigh in on that as well. I've got my thoughts on it, but I will yield to you guys. So who wants to go first? Oh, okay. There you go.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just point out that what was sent in by Councilmember Bradford, I'm sure is well thought out, but it appears to expand on our committee system rather than condensing it. So I'm not sure of the thought that goes into that, because there's it looks like a ton of subcommittees. So I just wanted to mention that it kind of looks like it works against us rather than for us.
Yeah, I kind of had the same thought process. I did like the idea that whatever subcommittee a committee has, that subcommittee doesn't have voting rights, but makes recommendations to the larger committee. I thought that was kind of a good idea, and that actually came from Councilman Sledge as well. So that's why I put that down at the bottom. But you are there. Oops, sorry.
So I agree that while Councilman Bradford has done a due diligence of separating out into subcommittees, it does defeat the purpose of kind of trying to consolidate some of them. Also, he has on here that the primary committee would meet and then assign legislation. I believe it's in our rules that the clerk, that the vice mayor delegates to the clerk that legislation is assigned to what committees. Is that correct, Hannah? Yeah. And also, it would cause delays if the primary committee has to vote or send bills to subcommittee and then back. That would create delays, and it would create more repetition than we're trying to get rid of. I think on where we are with what the handout you've given us, the proposed ones, I do think that gov ops, we might want to separate into subcommittees there, just because we know that like sometimes codes and public safeties have long meetings. And so we might want to consider breaking some of that up. I think that would be the only area that I would be concerned might get the perfect storm one night where we have long bills in each of those. And then I wanted to mention about the subcommittees not having voting rights. I mean, if they just make a recommendation, that's all that the current committees do. And so I think it's already implied that any subcommittee would be making a recommendation the way that our committees work now. I would think that maybe we want to have some discussion around making the committee vote stronger when things go to the floor that have failed in committee. That would be my recommendation. But I think it would be repetitive to have to to put out there that the subcommittee only makes a recommendation when that's all committees do already. But I think that otherwise, I think what the structure that we have on, not Russ's sheet, the other sheet, whatever we want to name that sheet, I think it's a pretty good breakdown. I think our only area is that we maybe want to do a subcommittee in GovOps just in case. So, and then I guess we do need to talk through, is the subcommittee, if legislation is assigned to a subcommittee, how does that track through the process? Is it going to create more time? So at the state legislature, when we're not under flow motion or a rule suspension, you would hear a bill. The bill would be assigned to the committee and then assigned to the subcommittee. It would be heard on a subcommittee, say, the first Tuesday, and then that following week, it would travel to the full committee. Do we want to start doing, how do we want to handle that with the subcommittees and committees? How is legislation going to travel through? Would it be, for example, where second reading is in the subcommittee if assigned to a subcommittee, and then before third and final reading on the floor, it goes to the full committee for consideration? I think that I don't think we've discussed that, and we need to flesh that out as well.
Is that something that you can weigh in on as far as like the flow?
The flow, yeah. So currently, it's the rules that set up the flow. So that could be amended in the rules if that's something that you want to do. That might be a little bit of a bigger task than, just making the committees more efficient. We'd also need to amend the rule that items aren't amendable on third reading, because
That's right,
I think
too,
a lot of
right.
the amendments come out of the committee discussion.
Yeah, if we are going to have subcommittees, we have to discuss how the flow works. And that's right, I forget that we can't amend on third.
Well, and as far as like subcommittees for public safety, yes, we've had, a couple of bills that we've spent a tremendous amount of time on that's in public safety, but it's not always. The public safety beer regulated, but we do a lot of, a lot of it is not necessary. Like, it wouldn't be necessary for everything that under public safety would need to be heard by a subcommittee to further complicate scheduling. You know what I mean? So there should be, or it would be ideal if we could figure out a way when we know that there's legislation that's going to take a long time that we want to dig deep into. Is that just when we call a special meeting and discuss it, and it not necessarily be in the regular? I mean, I'm just talking out loud.
There is the potential that we write in that every committee has a general subcommittee where bills can be sent to be heard that is not. So AKA like a special called meeting or vis-a-vis not having a listed subcommittee, it could just be sent to general sub, where at the state level, that's usually where things go to hide and die. But here it could be our kind of escape clause of where we need to talk about something more. They just all have an assumed general sub.
Yeah,
Hannah,
I like
what do you
that
think?
idea, because it's not always. Is that possible to have just like a miscellaneous subcommittee that legislation as needed gets put into this subcommittee?
So would it be a subcommittee for all committees, or each committee has a general subcommittee?
I guess what I was thinking there is that it would be just sent to, like, if I've got a bill on public safety, on a public safety issue that we're going to have a lot of testimony on or something, then rather than calling a special or we could continue to just call special meetings, or we could just say we're going to send it to the general sub.
Yeah, I think that you might want to consider pairing that with some sort of like automatic deferral or something. But I think if you do that especially, it could work, and it could be pretty, standardized, where if this is an issue that we want to discuss further, we're sending it to this general sub. It normally meets the week in between council meetings or whatever. So it's already been on second reading where it was deferred, and then there's more discussion in that subcommittee. I think that could work.
So Hannah, I think if we were going down that rabbit hole, as you just described it, it would then almost be more of a study committee, committee number 7, that's our study committee, or any committee that needs more time or something. But how would that work with, obviously, if I gave the example of an issue in public safety, but if something is about parks, it just goes to the parks sub and wouldn't need to be deferred.
Now, you might, so the only issue with that is that if you're going to create a new committee, then who's going to be on that committee? I think it would make more sense to keep the same members discussing it, because those are the people that I think have been selected to, discuss a certain topic, or, be more expert than the rest of the council on that subject matter. So I think that you'd probably want to keep it either a general sub, or you could just say that it's a
I think it just goes to
special
special
called
meeting.
meeting.
Yeah,
And
otherwise
that's just
it
something
could
that
get
you don't even have to
messy.
put into the rule.
Yeah.
I'm going to recognize Council Lady Van Rees.
Thank you very much. I think maybe we're overthinking this a little bit. I think that there should, I like these committees structure, that you have these 6 committees. The only thing I would change on the title of public facilities, I would say public facilities and culture, so that it's more representative of what's there. But I don't understand really the point of subcommittees. It seems like there should just be 6 chairs of 6 committees, and the following departments and their legislation go to that committee. I don't understand why we even need to say that there's a subcommittee. It's just a committee. So the committee chair would then decide if, hey, there's something coming up from one of these departments that needs more time, so I'm going to call a special meeting on that. Otherwise, everything on the agenda is just coming from that one committee. It seems like we're kind of put our old committees as subcommittees, and I just don't know that we even need them by name. It's just be more a matter of organization, so that the clerk knows that if certain legislation falls under what committee.
Yeah, I think that's sort of what we just circled back to, which is like, I guess special meetings are just necessary sometimes, because a standing subcommittee isn't always necessary. So, and we're defeating the purpose, like you're saying, we're defeating the purpose of having, 15 or 20 different subcommittees.
Yeah,
the whole thing is let's try to,
Yeah, so if Hannah, if there are, if we reduce it down to 6 committees, 6 committee chairs, then the executive committee also shrinks. And
Yes,
so I think it would be important to have an odd number. So with that in mind, I just kind of wanted to see maybe if we needed to go 7.
Ooh, that's a good question.
Interesting.
for those that couldn't hear that, the question was,
Then you
does
might
vice
not,
mayor
yeah.
vote in executive
Let me
committee?
see if that's in the rules.
While you're looking that up, Berkeley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I think that we should go with the list of committees that the body thinks is the best, but I don't know that this is necessarily more efficient. We're still going to have the same number of bills to consider. Yeah, I mean, we have some dual referrals, and there are exceptions, but most of the time, a lot of discussion happens in one and not necessarily in the others, with exceptions. So the committee meetings will be a lot longer, which could be more challenging to fit into puzzle pieces. And either the committees need to be larger, in which case that creates more scheduling problems, or a lot of people who have interests in certain topics will be left off of committees of their interest. Right now we do have a bunch of committees where they don't meet much, or they have a bill every now and then, but those aren't really taking up any time if they're not scheduled, or if they're just going to be, 15 minutes. Quorum will still be 50% of whatever the new committee size is. So I don't know that I don't know that we're necessarily creating a more efficient process, but I think that it's a good idea to revisit what our committees are and come up with a list that we're comfortable with.
Good grief. So, but y'all could hear my loud mouth, couldn't you? Okay. Good. So, Yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying. I just, I do think that this will be just a little bit easier. And yes, some of these meetings will be longer. So like, for example, the government operations and regulations, instead of having 1, 2, 3, 4 different meetings, 4 different committee meetings, you have one, and you take up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 10 bills instead of 2 bills. Are all those bills going to take that long? No, unless there's a bunch of, you do a consent agenda or, I mean, I haven't recognized.
I just add, if we're gonna, if a meeting right now is taking 45 minutes and another one's taking 15, another one's taking 30, that's going to be an hour-and-a-half meeting now that you have to schedule, and that all those members will be unavailable for any other meetings or other rooms. Like,
Hang on just a second. I'm going to. Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to do that. I didn't mean to do that, I swear. I was trying to do you. Finish your thought.
I think, with the exception of one of those dual referrals that happens to be contentious or complex and really long-lasting, the total meeting time is going to be the same. So the logistical challenges still exist. It's just harder to move people around because they're taken away for a bigger block of time.
Hang on 2 seconds, because,
Thank you.
yeah.
I have, I guess, my similar train of thought, maybe as everybody else, is really thinking about when you get to the end, as far as the side, all 40 of us, that we've had the choice of being on 3 or 4 committees, and what that could look like. You reduce us down if we have, I don't know if it would be 2 or 3 options, maybe. I'm not sure if you've gotten to that point in the conversation with the vice mayor about how that would.
That's his lane, and I'm going to stay out
Okay.
of it. But I would think, when you're combining those things, so say there's someone that really isn't, is interested in health, hospitals, and social services, and human relations and veterans. That's, if you're on the government ops, or no, not government ops, but whatever those are put together, you're basically on those 2 committees.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you're on 2 committees, but they're bigger and they combine more interests, if that makes sense.
It does. And I think that kind of going back to what Kathleen was talking about earlier with government ops, of looking at all these, that one does feel the meatiest. And I think looking at kind of going to transportation with traffic and public, part of public works and that kind of thing, there still feels like in public works today, so much kind of gray area about where and as part of the public works and transportation kind of transition. That would be my only thought, is marrying those 2 back together in some fashion to get through this transition part with the Department of Transportation and the alignment with solid waste. And so that's the only thing that when I look at this list that I think about, is there's still so many outstanding questions, and would it mentally still be kind of overlap between the 2, even though physically you'd be separated, if that makes sense, because of the questions still kind of go in both directions in the same committee, even though on paper, everything is divided.
Okay. Oh, Nancy's, but hang on just a second.
Thank you. I think it would be really important to talk to the vice mayor about whether or not, if there are 6 committees and 40 people, that there'd basically be 8 people on each committee, but that would he have the ability to change those committees more often than every calendar year, so that you're only going to serve on one committee for a year, and then he can move you around after that, because that would stop all scheduling problems, because you're on one committee and that's when it meets. That's my question.
So the rules currently govern the term of committees, and it's 1 year. So that could be changed by rule.
So I think ideally we would be on 2 committees still, because you don't want just 8 people on planning. And you don't want just 8 people on budget. So I think these committees would probably still have some variable there, and And then I think what we could do as well, while there's still going to be some dual referrals to committees, we might, and I don't think we have to do this now, I think it could be thought out after we get into the new committee structure, is how to deal with dual referrals. And I think something that could be done there is a hierarchy of the, I mean, we know the ones that are commonly dual referraled or multi-referraled. And some of those, like the abandonments, the right-of-way abandonments, the sewer and stormwater manhole, all that stuff that comes through planning, that's just like a pass-through and just goes through on consent there and in those other committees, we could just put in our rules that all of that type of legislation dealing with X, Y, and Z goes to one committee rather than 3. I think that could speak to some of it. Also putting the hierarchy of if an issue is going to be double referred to budget and to transportation, if it's about money, it goes to budget rather than if it's a policy issue. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Another thing is, I'm looking at this.
Or that could just be something that the vice mayor actually makes policy, like his own policy on, and implements it rather than delegating to the clerk, because it is more of a political question.
Looking at this as far as, we still have at least two committees that meet on Mondays before the meeting, before our Tuesday meeting, and that's because it takes so long. So budget takes forever, planning takes forever. The other one that would
forever.
Not anymore? Oh, well, but there's 3 that take up, that have a lot of legislation that they look at. So budget and finance, planning, whether it takes long or not, is still a long list of things. And then government ops and regulations would be a long list of things. So then you could still have, 3 meet on Monday and 3 meet on Tuesday, so that it's, you don't have to get here at 3 in the afternoon on Tuesday. You sort of balance that out. So budget and finance and planning, they're already used to meeting on Mondays. Keep that way. Government ops meets on Tuesdays, and maybe put children and human services, because at the end of the day, all of that legislation, even though it's sort of related, there's still not a whole lot that they take up. Transportation is going to be different because it's basically traffic and parking and public works put together. So that's going to, that'll be a little bit significant. But so I think there's ways to do it, and it just, to me personally, I would rather go to 2 meetings than 4 meetings, and have to worry where, what room, where am I going, what's the deal, all that. It's just, to me, it's simplified, but that's just how my brain works. So, yes, ma'am.
There's a logistics thing as well. I know that we talked about maybe taking the wall out of one of those rooms and making it bigger.
So that's one thing that I did want to mention, is that if committees are 16 people, they're going to have to meet in the chamber, at least how things are currently laid out. And I know that there are long-term plans about, increasing the size of committee rooms, but it's not going to happen September 1st.
Yeah, and I don't think every committee needs to have 16 members either, So I think there's a way to deal with it, and I wish Vice Mayor was here so he could sort of weigh in on this, because he's seen this, he's cool with this. I wanted his feedback as well, and so I think he's just waiting to see kind of what we want to do, and then he's, going to go with it. So, yes. Are you? Oh, I was like, yes. What'd you like? So I don't see. We haven't had a whole lot of disagreement on what the committees are, except hold on. You're in your own spot. Councilman Syracuse?
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the work going into this for sure. It's definitely a worthwhile conversation and needed. I have questions for Hannah. And you may not know some of the answers. This may be, that's the way we've always done it, answer. But if we could document some of these questions to actually try to get some answers on them, if possible. First off, who has the authority to make changes to the structure of committees?
To structures of committees?
Yeah, who has the
council as a body. It's something that's set up through the rules. So like the names of committees and the number of committees, that's something that's traditionally been in the council rules. So it's something that the council can change by rule.
So it's a rule change,
Yes.
basically? So it's just Rules Committee can make changes to the whole structure of committees?
So the council can amend the rules, and it takes a vote of the entire council. It's 27 votes to amend the rules.
Right.
Then technically they take effect 30 days after passage.
Okay, right, okay. But the proposal comes from within.
I mean, the proposal can really come from any council
From
member.
anywhere.
It goes to Rules Committee traditionally. That's something, I don't know that that's in the rule,
Right.
but that's,
Okay,
one of the way it's always been type things.
That makes sense. That's helpful. The history of the committee structure. Do we have any documentation of why names and how many people are in it? Anything like that? That may be a rosy
Not-
question.
Yeah, not any official record. And actually, I've had a hard time finding old versions of council rules.
Right.
So they might exist somewhere. The clerk might have them in, some document, but, not that I'm aware of.
It would be helpful to, I mean, if we don't have it, we don't have it, I understand. But it would be helpful to have some of the logic of the evolution of the prior council's decision-making as to why certain committees were created, why they were named, and how many people per committee were decided. Just to know. And so if we don't have that, that's fine. But what we need to do, level setting going forward, is to start documenting this now. This is more of a larger governance issue that I think if we're going to be making this change, that we need to document where we are, why, and where we're headed. I think that would be very helpful to the council in the next 20 years deciding, why the heck did they do that 20 years ago, right? Do we have any, why are parking and transportation and planning internally voted?
Those actually are governed by charter amendments.
That's
So the
a charter.
council, yeah, so the council
Okay.
elects a member of the Planning Commission and a member of the Traffic and Parking Commission. The charter amendment for planning actually specifies that person is the chair of the planning committee,
Right?
but it actually doesn't specify that for traffic and parking. So I think historically, they have served as the Traffic and Parking Committee chair, but that's not in the charter.
Okay. So would the interpretation then be that the Transportation and Planning, Land Use and Housing Committee be the internally elected roles?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, sounds like there may be a little gray area here where we want to clarify on the transportation side.
Yeah, and if that's something that, I mean, it could be put in the rule, and that, would be a clarification.
So I would ask that we look at that, right? Again, especially with the new NDOT and us having the proper oversight, which I like having transportation as the big committee. But if that's written out of the rules, that might be a future part of a rule
You're
update.
talking about the who's on the Traffic and Parking Commission being the chair?
Yeah, if that needs to be.
Yeah, it doesn't, what I was told is they don't have to be the chair.
Right.
We just have to elect someone to that commission for 2 years.
Sure,
But they don't necessarily have to be the chair. If we
Okay.
want them to be the chair,
yeah,
make that rule,
well,
but, the planning has to be,
okay,
yeah.
yeah, all right.
And I've asked multiple people and they all came back with the same answer, so that's my story and I'm sticking to it.
And going back to one of my original questions, I have questions about why are public elections under rules? More of a personnel issue, isn't it? Things like that. I like the concept somewhat of a consolidation. My opinion is that I'm not really in favor of this large government operations and regulations committee. I do think there's some value in council members having an opportunity to lead certain committees, that you're reducing the opportunity for some leadership in some areas. I understand that some committees don't really meet that often, don't necessarily have that much going on, and so I'm okay with that. I think a couple people have said it. The concept of subcommittees to me seems clunky, to say the least. We just put affordable housing as a bona fide committee. I think to put that back almost as a subcommittee now, I think we'll get a fair amount of pushback. My favorite part, I think, is the transportation. I think that's, ever since NDOT was created, obviously we have to do something about our Public Works Committee. And so I really do like that. I like how it combines transportation. Perhaps we should be thinking about how NDOT is the National Department of Transportation and Multimodal Infrastructure. We don't have anything that says something about infrastructure, or does that go under government operations? Perhaps infrastructure needs to remain with part of transportation, because that aligns with how we just voted to approve NDOT being created in the first place.
So transportation and infrastructure?
Perhaps, that's just a thought. And then you start to reduce the size of this gargantuan government operations committee. This is just thoughts and my opinions on that.
I had that separate when I first started this, and Councilman Sledge actually is who said, put those things together, and it made sense to me just because when you look at, rules, as far as rules, doesn't really meet all that often. What takes the most time is the public elections. Charter revision rarely meets. Personnel rarely takes up anything. I don't really public information, ITS. There was a lot of things that rarely, if ever, meets, and if they do, it's like one piece here and there. And so his thought was, just put it all together, and then that way. But to separate it back out, because that's what a couple people have said, is like separate that back out. So you would have government ops and government regs.
And yes, and that perhaps, for example, my committee, charter. We don't ever meet unless we really need to, and especially this past year. One thought is that in creating maybe an additional committee that doesn't necessarily meet all that often, but I think is important, the school board actually has a governance committee. And I would recommend we all kind of take a look at what they do with that committee, when they meet, and what it's used for. I think that's something that could be very valuable to this body. I think something like rules and governance could really stand on their own. As rules chair, you got to spend a lot of time knowing the rules and knowing them backwards and forwards. To put that under a large government operations and regs committee, to me, rules, governance, and charter are kind of like a committee that needs to meet when it needs to meet. So it's not necessarily re-expanding a lot of committee meetings, but I think it's worthy of standing on its own. And that's all I've got for now. Thank you so much. Appreciate the work.
Sure. Oh, wrong button. There we go. Councilman Rutherford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to correct the record on something that was said earlier. As the chairman of the Personnel Committee, it was stated that we don't meet very often. That's not actually true. We meet very regularly. We do have relatively small agendas,
Yes.
but we do meet on a very regular basis.
Thank you for clarifying. So,
Really quick, just because Councilman Syracuse brought up historical committees, I just pulled up the 2004-2005 Metro Council committees, and there were 15 committees, and each had most of them had 12 to 14 members. There were a few of them that only had 8, but that's kind of, I just think, interesting. I don't know how they found the time to have that many council members on that many committees, but.
And to kind of piggyback off of that too, Elizabeth emailed me, and every rule change is in the minutes, so we could go back and find everything from, when committees were changed. It would just require digging through the minutes.
So where would we like to go from here? Because we can't sit here and talk about this in perpetuity. So we need to have some sort of an action item, because if we're going to make a decision, suspend the rules for it to be in effect less than 30 days.
The other option on that would be to just wait 30 days and everybody would hold over and, for an extra 30 days. And I guess those are the two options.
Yeah, okay. So, anyway, I want to leave here with have made some sort of decision that we can then say, this is what we did. We had a special meeting. This is what we decided. Not a lot of people showed up, so this is what we did. Kathleen, I see that you want to talk there.
Thank you. I'm thinking that maybe what we do is take what is on the proposed committee structure document. We add on number 3 and culture. And maybe what we do is, instead of establishing subcommittees, is live under the new committee structure through December, and then address whether we need, or January or whatever, and then address if we need to tweak something from there. I will say that previous council members told me, so for the first termers, our first term, Vice Mayor Briley kept us all basically in the same committees and leadership positions the first 2 years, which I thought was very helpful. In previous councils, and I think Rosie can confirm this, is that like Vice Mayor Neighbors would change people's committees every August or so. And a lot of previous council members had told me just how that would get very confusing, and it was hard to remember which 4 or 5 committees you were on this time go around. And I really think that if we pare down to these 6 committees, or 7, what was the 7th one?
The only thing with pulling rules
I don't think
out
anything needs to be
is that
pulled
rules
out.
is going to meet quite often because there's late filed legislation every meeting. So I get pulling charter revision off if that's what we want to do, but then the whole thing was, well, charter revision literally quite almost never meets. So that's why we said, we'll just put it in there, and then if it needs to meet, if they take legislation up, they take it up. But separating out rules, they're going to meet every single meeting.
Yeah, I would like to move that we keep the 6, adding culture to public facilities, and we see if we need subcommittees or tweaks in 4 to 6 months.
So the other but timeout, because somebody else can second that. But when Councilman Syracuse, you said transportation and infrastructure. The only thing I see, I get it. Part of our infrastructure is water sewer. So then do you pull water sewer into transportation? Does that make sense? Is that something we want to do? To be honest with you, don't have a druthers either way. Council, this is confusing having different names.
No worries. Thank you, and I'm sorry to be tardy. I think as former chair of Public Works Committee and a member on that committee for 6 years now, I think there are some synergies because of things that happen within the public right-of-way. So water, sewer, kind of curb to curb stuff that's happening in the roadway. Obviously they're very distinct departments, and then now increasingly we're having some overlap because historically stormwater, ditch maintenance, et cetera, used to be at Public Works, right? Then that got rolled out and that got moved over to water. Now increasingly tree-based efforts, because we have, Councilman Syracuse knows that, kind of chapter 2 and how we define urban forestry is kind of wonky and still needs to be fixed, but a lot of that tree-based stuff happens now in the stormwater division of water. And so, I can see some merit in keeping water, sewer, but then, if you think about, you have a department and that accountability, you can't really kind of bifurcate. Even though there is a stormwater division and a water sewer division, that's kind of the complexity there, I think, of that, and why for so long, Public Works agenda is dense. We would have, items on consent, items for discussion, ordinances on consent. There's always 25 plus, things on that agenda. So I think Councilman O'Connell had made, and I don't know if that got elevated already, but he had made a suggestion about kind of, the sustainability and environmental aspects of things, and I see you have that here. I don't know if that was already spoken to earlier, but just, solid waste, recycling, environment, beautification, some of that kind of stuff. But that, again, crosses multiple departments, so I'm not sure where
that's why I was asking Councilman Syracuse. It's like, okay, so water, sewer, stormwater is totally infrastructure. That totally makes sense. But now we've got solid waste. Solid waste, not so much. But it's the same department now. So how do you separate one function of a department into two different, or do you just, because it's pretty self-explanatory, how many pieces of legislation are we going to deal with trash? Or, solid waste, I don't know.
A fair amount of late, I will say, just because there's been a lot of volatility in that space, especially around recycling and.
There shouldn't be.
Right. Well, if you look at recycling, there's just a lot of changing market dynamics about what we do there and that.
But that is a government operation. Is to me is solid waste.
I appreciate that.
Is an operation.
Yeah. And I would say from a subcommittee standpoint, I know under my chairmanship, but it did not get sustained. Council Lady Allen, we voted as a committee to create a recycling and solid waste subcommittee, kind of just for this reason, because in the context of public works, there was everything happening in the public right of way, transportation related, but that was distinctly different, and that's why we created that subcommittee. That didn't really get a chance to kind of take hold. But, I think it's definitely a separate thing.
So does it make sense to the people that are in this room to say transportation and infrastructure, move water, stormwater down to transportation because it is part of the right-of-way when we have those issues, and leave solid waste in government ops? Okay, I see nodding heads and I see shaking heads. I don't see an overlap. Maybe there would be, but if you're dealing with a solid waste issue, you're going to know it goes to government ops versus transportation, I would think. But let me hear you were the one that was shaking. You're the only one shaking your head, so.
So if you pull out infrastructure down to transportation, first of all, the thought was with transportation is that it was going to be all transportation. You could make government ops and regulations, the simpler way to describe it is that utilities are under government ops and regulations, and water, stormwater is basically a utility. Solid waste is, I guess, a quasi-utility, but those are essential utility government activities. So, for example, NES, if something came through about NES, that it would go under GovOps and regulations. Now, yeah, you could describe a lot of this as infrastructure, but I think transportation is a big enough issue that it needs to remain its own. And then government ops and regulations, because it's not like we're voting on, yes, we vote on big water projects, Angie, and we need to know the size of the pipes and things like that. But it's very different from the transportation plan that is still very much up in the air. I don't think that we have water issues that are as up in the air as our transportation issues right now.
Okay, so that makes, sense as well. What's the title? It's the Nashville Department of Transportation and Intermodal, right? Intermodal infrastructure. Multimodal infrastructure. So it's not necessarily infrastructure, it's the multimodal infrastructure. So it's not, so it's not necessarily water, sewer, that type of infrastructure. It's not all infrastructure is my point. So maybe it does make sense just to leave it in government ops. I got all kind of people. Go ahead, NVR.
Thanks. I like the use of the word utility in the title. The government operations and utility as opposed to and regulations. I think that kind of helps kind of identify the fact that that you're talking about utilities. That makes sense to me. And there will be continued discussion, obviously, about recycling and stormwater issues that make sense to be under utility.
Okay. I don't know that I would drop regulations, though,
Yeah,
just
when I'm
because-
thinking of a utility,
Put a
that's
comma.
also an essential government operation. So like providing water, electricity,
Yeah.
trash pickup, those are government functions.
Yeah.
And so I think while utility might, again, we were trying to pare down the names as well. So that's, I think in one of the drafts, we'd had utility, and I think we kind of pulled it out because a government operation is.
Yeah, but for the general public to know what committee it is that they're interested in, I think that the use of the word utility is more of a, I understand that I'm paying a utility bill. You know what I mean?
So would it be like government and utility operations and regulations?
Or government operations, regulations, and utilities.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with the use of a comma.
Okay.
Oxford comma or regular comma?
Oxford, I think we're doing Oxford commas now.
Council Lady Henderson, you're recognized.
Thank you. Apologize. I got, commas on the brain right now. I just forgot what I was thinking about earlier. I think, and I apologize, I did not hear the initial part of the discussion, but was there any discussion around kind of confirmations, public elections, charter revision, personnel, maybe that being its own thing, and then public safety, codes, stormwater, just basically committee number 2 being 2
Separated.
committees. Right.
It was originally.
Okay.
It was originally, and then when I sent it out to the body, part of the feedback came back from actually Councilman Sledge, putting it together and calling it government regs. Or no, did we have government regs and government ops and put them together? She's nodding her head. I've gone through so many versions of it, and I don't know. That was part of it, is
Okay.
that looking at the history, I had whoever in the council, maybe Miss Barbara, give me, like, historically in the past year, in the past 2 years, how many pieces of legislation did each of these committees see? And if it was super small, it was like, okay, well, let's combine that and let's see what of these committees makes sense to sort of go together. Obviously, you wouldn't put health with transportation. That makes, you know what I mean? So it was really kind of looking to see what made sense. And then I had several council members within the committee and outside the committee that gave their suggestions. And so this is just sort of a culmination of a lot of people's opinions, trying to make the best of all these worlds. But yes, to your point, I originally had it separated. And then it was like, well, how many pieces of legislation does rules see? Does charter revision see? Does personnel see? Does public information and ITS see? Not a whole lot. And so if you're going to add 3-4 pieces of legislation each meeting, just throw it into government ops and regs. That was the thought process. But there's an argument to be made to separate it as well. So that's.
Okay, I appreciate that. I think for Committee 4, this may have already come up. I would just call it Human Services. I don't know why children needs to be on the front of that. I think that's just kind of confusing.
I think that was because of the education part of it.
Well, I just call it Human Services and Education.
I'm cool with that.
I love children. I have 2 of my own, but it just seems very awkward that the first name of a committee, when everything else is becoming much more kind of, there's a lot under this umbrella, operations, regulations, public facility. We're getting in a more general sense, and that's one of the few things that we're saying very specifically, because you go there, then it's like, well, what about parks, and what about libraries, and what about this? Then you're starting to kind of reintroduce every.
So human services and education.
Human services, keep it simple, but sure, education,
I
the
think
will of the
people
body.
that are feel really strongly about education, I don't know. Anyway, whatever y'all think.
Yeah, I think it's just at a certain point, to Councilor Van Reese's standpoint, like, there's trying to kind of bridge how it used to be, right? And I think some of our committee names were super awkward because we were trying to, like, basically put every single thing in the title of the committee, right? And it's like, are we going to swing the pendulum all the way to the very simplistic, 2-name whatever, or are we going to try to strike the balance in the middle. And I think if we do it in the middle, to be frank, then it kind of feels like, well, you left out parks, we left out arts, we left out this, you left out education,
Yeah,
you left
right.
out that. So I think the middle path is frankly harder. I think we just need to kind of decide, do we have the multi-name committees so that, frankly,
Yep.
for the community to understand. I think in this transition, if we proceed with this, you're going to have almost kind of a subline, like what falls under this and kind of why, for the community's understanding.
Sort of like what's on the sheet
Right.
of explaining. Yeah.
It's helpful, I know, as past chair of Parks and Libraries, now Parks, Library, and Arts, when we have kind of these layers, and Council Lady Murphy will understand this, Planning Commission, Planning Committee of the Council, Parks Board, which existed before Metro Government, Parks Board. When you're trying to work with Parks Board members and talk about policy issues, trying to clarify for people, well, I serve on the Parks Committee of the Council, right? Like, then that's clear. Like, oh, okay, that's why we're talking about this, or that's why we have to communicate or work on this, right? So, at the point that we have to say, well, I serve on the, Public Facilities Committee of the Council, which includes the Parks Department.
Yeah.
Have to kind of.
Okay, so are you wanting to talk? Hang on just a second. Okay, Councilman Syracuse.
Thanks. To follow up on what Councilmember Henderson was talking about, I was going to ask about that as well, as far as the name of that committee. One of the points I made earlier was about why rules and public elections and confirmations were all kind of bundled under the same committee. To me, we need to focus on people, right? So human services. Why don't we have that committee also be the one that has the oversight over people who we appoint to boards and commissions? Just a thought.
So moving confirmations
And public
and
elections.
public elections to human services
And personnel.
and personnel.
Right? Because this is about our employees. It's about the biggest portion of our budget, which is education. It's about people. So maybe that makes sense for that committee to be focused on people.
Does anybody have any objection to that? Okay, hold on. Sorry,
The reason we had them separated out is rules, confirmations, public elections, charter revision is all governmental functions, operations, and regulations. Children, or what is just human services, it is about people. It is about services to people. It is about the services we provide. It's not just about, if it was a people committee, we would name it the people committee, and then we could put confirmations in there and some of that other stuff. But it's more about the human services aspect than the human aspect of the committee. Services provided to humans.
So it's more.
That's why Russ Bradford's not here, so it's not animal services.
So your point is that the rules, confirmations, public elections, personnel, that's more of a regulatory type thing versus a service like education or MAC or whatever.
What's more important, the regulatory aspect of that, or putting the right people in the right spots that serve other people?
Point taken. So do we want to keep this moving, do we want to vote on that? Or, because I'd like to come up with something final here. Again, I think we could talk about this in circles for days and days and days. Do we want to take confirmations, public elections, and personnel and move it under human services? Can we just do a show of hands? 3, 4, and against is 2. Okay.
So you're moving what down there? Personnel?
So confirmations, public elections, which public elections never sees anything, and then personnel.
So in that case, should we just move confirmations to every committee? And so every board or commission that comes up for confirmation goes to their committee that they're over? Because that makes more sense than just putting confirmations in a committee that is about a committee that's supposed to be education, hospitals, social services.
Okay. Okay. You're good.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I think that suggestion has merit. I appreciate that because I think, when you're thinking about a board or commission that has oversight or is related to a department, that makes sense. I'm always trying to kind of, there's somebody that's getting appointed to the Parks Board, so I'm going to try to go to rules if I can from the Parks Committee chair. It does, I think, make sense for that to come through committee. Now, that's a whole
And then the
nother-
second piece of
That's
that,
a
Angie, would be,
whole-
so should personnel, if we're going to have personnel things considered, should that go to every committee or should it go under government operations and regulations? Personnel issues that come before us is about the operation of metro government. It's not about the legislation that comes to personnel. Like John Rutherford, I was chair of personnel. That's not human services. Personnel things are like we just did the retiree health care. We've done quadros, qualified divorce orders. That's the type of legislation that goes to personnel. Again, not a human services issue. It's a government regulation. So, that doesn't make sense either to pull that out. We can either stick with government regulations or is going before the government regulations committee, or we could just move and become a committee of one, the whole body on the floor. I see you, Dave. That's not what we want to do. We want to have like with like and group together.
Okay, so do we want to vote again after having those arguments or no? Or hang on 2 seconds. Sharon.
I was just going to ask if kind of going back to the idea of confirmations being attached to the committee that they'd be connected to. You kind of shuddered at that idea, so tell me.
I just think that that's a little difficult. For one, I think it'll be a lot of work to be trying to get people to the right place at the right time. I think that that's really the number one issue that I would have. The nice thing about everybody going to rules now is that it's always at the same time. It's always right before the meeting. You don't really have to tell somebody, okay, that's actually at 4 p.m. on Monday, and somebody else is 5 on Tuesday.
I was being facetious with the confirmation part.
But yeah, I was gonna say kind of to
Now, so to your
Totally took that bait right there. I was,
to your point with confirmations, because it is always at 5:15 or 5:30 or whatever, and everybody knows it's right before the meeting and they have the same place to go. If we have confirmations in this larger group or this larger thing, should confirmations be separate? Because you don't want these people to have to sit through all of our shenanigans, with all these other things that we're taking up. It just takes too long. Right now, I feel bad sometimes when we're dealing with late filed and different things that come up and they're sitting there, sort of waiting. So do we separate confirmations out and just have that always or maybe as a standing subcommittee that always meets at whatever time so that they know when to come in instead of having to sit, they can come to the subcommittee of, does that, you know what I mean?
yeah, I think that makes sense.
Hold on. You got your right name and everybody else has
If
the
I,
wrong name.
yeah, I know. I'm going to throw out a suggestion on rules and confirmations. There has been more discussion about people on certain boards and commissions more this term than I think any in history, probably. And I think that whenever the benefit of having budget and finance and planning and zoning in the larger room, when people can talk about it, has been of great benefit. And even though it's recorded and people can watch it, they usually are watching it after confirmations have taken place. And I wonder if we can consider having rules and confirmations as part of the council meeting. So that if someone's up to be on a committee, then the whole body hears from them as to why they want to be on it. and we vote as a body to confirm or not confirm. So
I don't know
instead
that you want to do that with rules, because that's like late filed stuff. I don't know.
on
that-
confirmations.
Just confirmations. Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Because then there's more.
Yeah.
There's more transparency, and it gives everybody a chance to understand who it is they're voting on if they weren't able to make it into the room to hear this person or that kind of thing.
I like the idea of that. Is that even a possibility?
I think it's a possibility. I'm not sure that it's something that you necessarily want to do. I think that there is value to having a specific committee that vets a candidate as opposed to the entire council trying to vet someone at once. I think that could turn into just, a lot of questioning of a particular candidate.
Well, and so what you could do is Tuesday before the meeting, that be in this room, and have confirmations as a subcommittee that meets at the end of that meeting, every single meeting, so that there's all their meetings are done. If members from the body want to come to be part of the confirmations part of it, that's great. And then it still is, the same as people that are being confirmed know where to go. It's always at the same time. They don't have to sit through, legislation that they obviously don't care about. Is that a good compromise of, we have the bigger room, people can, and they're not pulled in different directions? I mean, confirmations kind of happens at the end anyway.
Yeah, I'm just looking for more transparency, and I understand that could generate more pontification with it, but you got to change?
Yeah.
Hold on. Oh, you have your, yeah.
So Hannah, remind me right now, like if somebody is being appointed to a board or commission, I can bump them from consent, but it would be a vote of the body or a ruling of the vice chair for that person to speak. Which is it? Vote of the body or rule of the vice chair?
The candidate to speak?
Rule suspension? So what I'm wondering is, I like where we're going. I think it's a little dangerous to put all the interviews and things in the committee in the council meeting. I'm wondering though if we could get to a similar goal of that certain appointments can be either bumped, where basically quote unquote the hearing would be in the council meeting, or if we also or we want to look at all the boards and commissions, and certain boards and commissions do just come before the whole body, like, I don't know, big ones or something. So.
Well, I mean, technically every board and commission appointee comes before the council. They're
The
normally
person
just
speaking, though, is my point. When I say come before the council,
the person speaking.
like the candidate can speak.
I don't know that there is an opportunity for them to speak, except for things like public elections, which would be like IDB, where there's a slate of candidates and you're electing. I think that the candidate's allowed to speak, but I'd have to check the rule on that.
Is it not the best of both worlds, though, to have a subcommittee of confirmations?
But subcommittee implies then that it would still have to go to the full committee for a vote. So what you would be talking about is another standalone committee that's just confirmations.
That's true. That's true. And I'm okay with that, too.
Well, and then I might make the suggestion to the vice mayor that somehow the people on that committee have one person from each of the other committees. I mean, it would be a
So is that the
scheduling issue.
executive committee?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So then
you
the
could-
A
executive
different
committee-
type of executive committee. It might not be the chair, but somebody from each committee present. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, however it works. Yeah, it seems to,
Okay.
that way you have an automatic built-in diversity of ideas and opinions.
Correct. Okay.
Or their designation, yeah. I mean,
Okay, so,
then that gives some of the power back to the council that the mayor's office is acquisitioned.
and instead of having, maybe instead of having it, like, having a separate chair, so you have either the chair or the vice chair of each committee in this committee, and then could pro tem be the chair of that committee, works for me. Okay, so can somebody make that motion?
So wait, is that going to be just confirmations, or should that be rules and confirmations?
No, not rule. You don't want to get into rules is like
confirmation.
late filed and all that. I don't know that you want to get. It's just the confirmations. Now you maybe could do charter revision that way as well, if you want to put confirmations in charter revision, or do you just leave?
Well, I mean, that probably makes sense. Could you, Chair, could you explain if this is the seventh committee? Could you explain again the titles of the 7 committees? And that might be a motion that we
Yes.
can make.
So, as we have it now, correct me if I'm wrong, we've got budget and finance, government operations, regulations and utilities, public facilities and culture, human services, transportation, planning, land use, and housing. Huh? And then confirmations and possibly confirmations and charter revision, if we want to add the charter revision to that.
The only adjustment would be on for human services and education.
Well, I thought we had a discussion, they said less is more.
Okay, just
so-
if the word needed to be in there, I know that was.
I don't really, it doesn't bother me either way.
Then I move that those would be the names of the 7 committees.
Anyone a second? Do we want to vote on that? All in favor? Any opposed? Any not voting?
This is just the recommendation to the
This is
committee, right?
this is the recommendation of the Rules Committee to the body.
I'm not on the Rules Committee.
People aren't on. We're going to have to vote on this in rules.
Okay, so you're opposed? Okay,
And why are you?
yeah, right. Okay.
Why?
Is there something that you would change? Or you're just opposed to sort of the whole idea of it in general? Okay, so there's okay, good to know, brick wall. Okay. So the other thing that I wanted to have the committees mean something, because right now you could have all opposed and it still goes to the floor just like any other thing. So yes, it's an opportunity for us to have more conversation, sort of, but we end up having the conversation on the floor anyway. So in order for the committees to have teeth and to really matter, and especially if we're going to have fewer and people really sort of elbowing down and diving into these subjects, would it be like if you get more opposed than in favor, that it requires 27 votes instead of 21 votes on the floor, or something to where there's, at that point, there's no sense in having committees. If it has no teeth, who cares if you show up or not, just to avoid a deferral, really? Hold on, wrong, wait, yeah. Oh, I got too many people, hold on, I gotta shut some people up. Okay, there you go.
Thank you. So right now, we do have indefinite deferrals that you can do from the committees, and if that prevails over the violation of the sponsor, then the floor discussion doesn't happen. I think that in addition to that, the value of the committees is the vetting and the amendments and all the discussion that happens. I mean, there's a lot more important stuff that comes out of the committee than the vote, and you end up really putting a lot of power into what the makeup of a committee happens to be as to the chance of and which committees a bill's assigned to. That will then really determine its chances of passage, which
And I agree with
concerns
that.
me.
Yeah, I agree with that. I just wanted to throw it out there because I've had a couple people sort of suggest that but you're always on, by the way.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I don't know that we can change the vote threshold for ordinances. I think the charter lays out every instance of requiring 27 votes.
Gotcha. Okay. Hold on.
So I think to Dave's point, we do have the indefinite deferral, and maybe what we need to be doing as committee chairs is if a bill fails, then somebody makes a motion to indefinitely defer it. I don't think we're using the indefinite deferrals enough, maybe. And that would solve part of that problem.
I think there probably needs to be another workshop on rules because we kind of lost that first year for first termers to kind of understand what we worked on the previous term on how those rules change. Because I don't think that people know that if they vote against something in committee, that it has an actual effect on automatic deferrals and how those rules work.
I mean, I've had people say in committee, they vote one way in committee, and then when they get to the floor, they vote a separate way. And it's like, well, in committee, it's closer quarters, and I don't want to hurt their feelings. I'm like, are you serious? So, we probably need to avoid stuff like that. But to your point, having a rules refresher, I think probably once a year actually is maybe in order.
Yeah.
You're
Hey,
still on.
I'm still on. So, I mean, if a majority of the people of the council on the floor supports a bill, then I think that that bill should have the opportunity to pass, no matter what happens in committee. I think really the idea when we did the indefinite deferrals last term was like, there are some bills that are just egregious and is damaging to even discuss. So let's knock that off. I mean, by and large, council members are pretty self-regulating about what bills they bring to the floor for a final vote. We very rarely vote down a bill, and it's not because we're scared to vote down a bill. It's because when folks sense that there's not support for their bill, they end up amending it so that there is support or pulling it. I think that the system's generally working pretty well as it is.
Okay, so we'll leave that out. Is everybody cool with subcommittees do not have voting rights, but would just make the recommendation, or do you want the subcommittees to have voting rights? You're there now.
I wouldn't even call them subcommittees. I would just say there's 7 committees, and the following items are heard at these committees, so that there's no such thing as a subcommittee, just things that you hear in committee.
Okay.
So I wanted to just get people's opinion particular to charter revision. So, to your point, not much coming through there, but, in the context of any particular council term, I think you're kind of aggregating things that you think might be changes. And it's almost, yes, we do have some legislation come through in response to like some of the things that we were seeing on the elections side and public petitions and so forth that has to be responsive. But largely the work of that body is almost kind of project-based, right? For that term, we as a body collectively, what are your little quirky, technical fixes? What are some bigger picture things? Aggregating that information and sharing that with the council and, getting that through. That's really kind of a specific project-based effort. So, somebody needs to manage that. And so I just wonder when there's something of that import and it's in a larger committee, how is somebody being designated to manage a particular project effort? And then also too, just, the whole way we're kind of reworking this is, I think this has, it's a good exercise to think through. I do think we need to make some changes, but, there's sort of the processing the legislation, right, and having the discussion and amending the bills, but then there's also two kind of sometimes bigger conversations, right, like collectively as a committee, what policy do we want to deliver? Like we have less of those kind of conversations. And then there's kind of the oversight piece too, departmentally, operationally, have we heard that there's a problem here, or how are we troubleshooting that? Or, there has to be kind of sometimes time for that dialogue, which I think we do a fair amount of in public works or transportation, just because there's so many processes and systems. And so I'm struggling a little bit where I feel like I absolutely see the merit in these changes, and I think I'm supportive, but then I also know that, as you start to kind of narrow stuff down, the ability to do whether project-based efforts or other things, if it's only happening in subcommittee where that person doesn't really have the authority of a vote or otherwise, it kind of gets us into that space where we, it's like creating all the special committees, like it's just, those sometimes have merit, but then also sometimes they're dilutive to the authority of the existing committee, of which they could have been a subcommittee. I'm just kind of blabbing a lot, but I guess I'm just trying to kind of get everything that's in my head related to this.
Well, I think,
out.
I think traditionally the chair has selected or invited their own vice chair, but this could be an opportunity to where if the vice chair of that committee is the point person for charter. The vice chair for public facilities and culture is the point person for any large item ticket. It's like it kind of gives more weight to the vice chair of that committee, so that the vice mayor may want to appoint vice chairs and chairs instead of just the chairs. It's an idea.
So the vice chair would be basically preside over whatever subcommittee or special project.
Special project from inside that.
From within that.
Yeah, they'd
Yeah.
have that responsibility. That's an idea.
Yeah. I do like the idea of moving charter revision to the confirmations, only because the executive committee or the vice chair, right, is there. So that's who meets. That just makes sense to me. And pro tem presiding makes sense, and it's very rarely going to happen anyway. But you've got those players. So do I need a motion on that? Or we already did that. Confirmations and charter revision, right, as number 7. And the executive committee or the vice chair of whatever committee would be on the committee, and then pro tem presides,
So,
correct?
One thing that I do want to point out is that the selection of the vice chair is in the rules, so that's another rule that you need to change, but it can be done.
It's an idea. It may be a bad one. It was just an idea.
Okay.
Thank you. First of all, both the selection of the chair and vice chair are rules, and those can be changed. The council could vote on chairs and vice chairs if we wanted to. That's just a rule. Also, just with respect to charter revision, we haven't done anything. It was because of COVID last year. There was going to be talk about charter revisions in the spring. You have to pass charter amendment proposals about a few months before a scheduled election, so you don't trigger $1 million special election. Whole nother thing. So this coming year, there's going to be a lot of activity in charter revision. We haven't had the opportunity yet, but we're coming up, and when spring rolls around, there's going to be a lot of meetings around a number of different proposed charter amendments that I know are going to be coming out from around about the body. And so that'll be a pretty hefty conversation and should be a well thought out, committee.
So are you saying?
I'm not saying anything, just sharing the information.
So to follow to Dave's point is where I really like that confirmation was going to be like the chairs of committees, because that should give them, a committee chair, some more time to their committee leadership obligations. If we know we're going to have a heavy charter revision year or two coming up, then I'm not sure that we want the charter revision committee to be the same as what is the de facto or
Right, so that's
de
what I was
facto,
saying.
yeah,
So-
because I think that would just be a lot.
So do
So
we
I
have
think
the-
that's a good point, Dave, that maybe
8th committee.
that or charter, that or confirmations and charter revision isn't made up of executive. Either way.
It's probably cleaner just to have confirmations as the 7th and charter revision as 8. And then when charter revision needs to meet, charter revision can meet. And when they don't, they don't. It's not going to be all the time, So do you want to make a motion? I'm trying to, we've been here for almost an hour and a half, and I want to respect your time.
Okay, so the motion is budget and finance, government operations, regulations and utilities, public facilities and culture, human services, transportation, planning, land use and housing, confirmations, charter revision.
Yes. Yes.
Would that make charter revision a full committee, or would it be ad hoc?
Y'all tell me, full committee or ad hoc? Full committee? Okay, full committee. All right. I mean, this is a lot of good conversation. I know it's going to have some more when we, I'm going to bring this up at Rules on Tuesday so that we can actually vote on it. I hope that everyone in Rules that's not here watches this and listens, because I hate having conversations twice. That's what the purpose of this was. So if we can get the link to this and send it to the Rules Committee as soon as it's available so that they can review it, that would be great if they need help going to sleep. So does anybody else have any questions or comments or?
As a point of clarification, did y'all agree with me in regard to not calling things subcommittees, but rather just the following things are heard by this committee? Because the word subcommittee makes me think that it's more meetings instead of less.
Yeah, I mean,
I just wanted to make sure that I think that that's what.
there was very few subcommittees anyway. In fact, affordable housing was a subcommittee of planning. Parks, Greenways, and Open Space was a subcommittee of public facilities, but it doesn't necessarily have to be.
Yeah, it's just clarification. It's like we said, it's really important that affordable housing is heard in the Committee of Planning, Land Use, and Housing, and it includes the following, that the affordable housing is listed. So it's the idea of having the things that will be heard by the committee are that
So
kind
do
of.
you want to say planning, land use, and affordable housing?
No, just, I'm fine with planning, land use, and housing, but then covering planning, zoning, historical, and affordable housing.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I get it.
Title, not subcommittee. There you go.
Yeah. Okay.
In our effort to streamline, planning, land use, and housing is super redundant. I know that we've always had planning, obviously with planning commission, we have to retain that, but planning is land use and housing is one of land uses, but I don't know. Any thoughts, Chair? I'll defer to you on that, but it just seems a little redundant.
So what are we called right now? Planning, zoning, and historical. Which, so I think when we were first talking about this, Courtney, I think I initially had it as just land use. I don't think I had planning there until we talked about planning commission, planning chair. But the thing is you're right. Like all of these are land use, fall under land use.
Right, and
Policy
planning
and
and
all that
zoning
kind of
was
stuff.
kind of redundant.
But,
to
Yeah.
start with
right,
anyway.
planning and
Yeah.
zoning. is the
Because
same
like
as
it's
planning and land use.
not everything we do is planning, not everything we do is zoning, not everything we do is historical, but it is all land use. So I would be comfortable with it just being land use, but for like clarity and communication with people, it seems that planning. What do you want, Hannah?
So
not like what do you want, but
my
are you thinking?
preference is that planning be in the title because the charter is worded that the individual who's selected to be on the planning commission is the chair of the planning committee, if one
It
exists.
just says planning committee.
It says planning committee, like if it exists, something like that. So to avoid any question, I think putting planning in the title works.
Yeah, I think we're a little bit in a similar place to human services and education, or
Yeah.
planning and housing. Are we doing the housing to be deferential to the affordable housing ad hoc? Or are we just going to call it the
It
planning
is.
committee? Just a thought.
I think someone made the point earlier that, we had just separated out affordable housing as a separate thing, and now it's sort of going, back in. So I did want to at least have that out there. So if we're not going to have subcommittees, I think
we could just strike land use. Would that be better, Angie, if it was planning and housing?
I guess. I apologize. I feel like it's what I was saying earlier. We're moving to a place of a very simple title with a lot of things under it. And this is just one where we still have 3 different things mentioned. And I'm not necessarily saying that's bad. I just wanted to kind of call it out for our consideration.
Hold on. There.
I'm not very good with English, but this may be an appropriate use of the semicolon to say land use, semicolon, planning and housing. That's just am I using
Yeah.
English correctly?
Another thought is that, a lot, obviously, of what we do is zoning, and that's what people come and are upset about. And so if we take that out, is that going to be a problem? I don't know. I'm just thinking zoning is huge, So if we take that out of a title of a committee, is that going to freak people? You know what I mean? I don't
So
know.
should we just call it planning, keep it as planning and zoning when it's,
Or planning,
generically
zoning, and
named?
housing. I don't want to be not deferential to that, to the affordable housing unit, perspective of it. But are you trying to talk? Yeah.
I just got a text suggesting that we just have one big committee called infrastructure and just go with that. Thank you.
Well, I think we discussed infrastructure earlier.
I mean, just one single committee that everything is infrastructure.
Oh.
Everything is infrastructure, so.
Yeah, so just meet here every, first and third Tuesday at 6:30 and go? Okay. So, I want to finish up this discussion because we've made a lot of progress, but so what are we going to do? Planning, zoning, land use, housing, affordable housing, what are we, let's come to a decision, at least in this room, of a recommendation. I think we're going to have an issue with the affordable housing folks, honestly, if we drop that. Councilman Syracuse? Oh, hang on, I got too many people.
Thanks. The one word that we are so far have dropped here that, I know it says it covers planning, zoning, and historical, but if we're going to drop that, it's nowhere to be found anywhere now. And I just think that's a sensitivity thing that we should consider, that if we're not
What are we losing again?
historic,
Oh, historical.
we've lost that totally now. Where does it belong? Is the question.
Well,
That's kind of the point of going back to very simple, because then you're not being preferential to, but this is still a little more important than anything else. We're going to, this is still a little more important than anything else. We're going to add it back to the committee name. That's a slippery slope. We'll just keep adding things back. So
okay, well, so
I
then-
just like planning, to be frank, just keep it simple. But I'm going to defer to our chair of planning committee, because I think
Oh,
she should decide.
yes.
I like the simplification, but I understand what Councilmember Syracuse is saying. But I thought we were going down a path in which we were going to have simplified committee names, but have essentially subtitles that would include what they cover. And so
Right.
therefore, planning would have a subtitle that explains that it covers zoning, historical, housing. That would be a part of the subtitle as opposed to the full name. And everybody's going to just call it planning anyway, as they do now.
Right. That's fair. Okay, so,
I was just say, I have a little petty 2 cents, which is to not call it planning committee, because I think that we will run into the issue of planning commission, planning committee. That's something that happens with traffic and parking committee versus commission.
Right.
And you're removing that with transportation, but to go back to that, that's just a silly little thing that
Hannah, what
might
would
happen.
be your ideal title for this particular committee?
So I will say we do call it P and Z
P&Z,
already.
that's what I was gonna say.
So
Just call
planning
it
and
P&Z
zoning,
and
planning,
be done.
zoning, and housing, planning, zoning, historical, any of those works for me.
So keep it planning, zoning, housing. And take out land use, since it's all land use? I don't know. Is everybody okay with that? Okay. Okay, renewed motion of budget and finance, government operations, regulations and utilities, public facilities and culture, human services, transportation, planning, zoning and housing, confirmations, charter revision. All right, does anybody else have any questions or comments or funny stories? All right, thanks for coming out. I really appreciate y'all taking the time to do this. I think it's, oh, no, we're not adjourned yet. Hold on.
Can you clarify what happens next? So, you were given this charge by the vice mayor as chair of rules.
Well, I was
This
given
is-
this charge by a lot of people, but yes, as rules chair, it sort of falls under my, I guess, deal. So I will take what we just came up with.
I guess I'm just wondering, where's the executive committee factor into this, if at
don't.
all?
It'll go to rules will vote on it, and then it'll come to the floor. And the whole body votes on it.
Okay, well, I guess I just would make the suggestion, I mean, I know we feel like we're under a lot of temporal pressure here because of the end of this or whatever, but, you know, we've discussed a lot today. I mean, respectfully, I know a lot of work has gone into it, but whether coming through the executive committee or having maybe another, like, refresh this and another opportunity, it just feels like it's moving pretty fast. And that's just me, but are you suggesting then that what happens next is the Rules Committee would vote on this per this discussion of a random group of council members who could show up today, and then
We've
would
had
be
multiple
before the whole
discussions of
body?
it. The last rules committee meeting, we had a discussion of it.
Okay.
The first version of this came out. Then I got some feedback. I refined it from there. So this is not the first time we've talked about it. We've talked about it for months.
I appreciate that. I respect and appreciate the work. I mean, please, I mean, that's not what I'm saying. I just, it just seems like now at the finish line, I think it'll be, I mean, I guess everybody was afforded the opportunity to be here, so I guess, but I just,
So if you would prefer, I can bring it up to the rules committee. And then if you want me to refer it to the executive committee, that's fine. To me, that was what this was for. If you're interested in this conversation, you should have been in this room.
Okay.
And you also had the ability, because this came out 2 weeks ago.
I appreciate
and
that. Yep.
The communication was, if you have feedback, if you have changes, send it to Hannah. Hannah can send it to me. I can reflect those. We can discuss that.
Okay.
So I think continually having it, because we can talk about it until the end of time, honestly.
Yeah.
There's so many ways to do it. So I would prefer to just pull the trigger or not.
okay, yeah. I mean, I guess the only thing that's just in my mind as a former committee chair, the role of that executive committee vis-a-vis this versus, so again.
I don't feel like we have an executive committee right now.
Well, that's because the vice mayor rarely calls the executive committee, but,
That's why I came to this meeting. I'm not on the rules committee.
right, neither am I. I'm,
Chair, so
yeah,
I found that this was important.
yeah. I don't presently chair a committee either, so, yeah.
Yeah, we've got just as many people here, well, not quite. There's almost as many people not on the committee that are here that are on the committee. So that was the whole point of having this special meeting, is to not just have a committee meeting, because I can do that every other week. So
Okay, I appreciate that. So just the
But I
next
mean,
step then to clarify is that it will go to Rules Committee for their vote as a recommendation to the body, and then the body will discuss it.
yeah, and we can say, hey, we want the executive, like, let's refer it to the body can do what they want.
Okay.
We can vote to defer it and definitely defer. I mean, I don't know whatever, but at some point we have to come there with a product. This is the recommendation.
I appreciate that. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for your work. Thank you.
Sure. All right. Now we're adjourned.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.